Trump cornered Netanyahu, but he also might have saved him. We take a closer look at a story that's not just about two world leaders, but about power, pressure, and survival on the global stage. The title says it all. Trump cornered Netanyahu, but he also might have saved him. It's a phrase that captures the strange paradox of modern politics, where a friend's help can look a lot like a trap, and an ally's pressure can end up being your lifeline. Good evening. Tonight, we take a closer look at a story that's not just about two world leaders, but about power, pressure, and survival on the global stage. The title says it all. Trump cornered Netanyahu, but he also might have saved him. It's a phrase that captures the strange paradox of modern politics, where a friend's help can look a lot like a trap, and an ally's pressure can end up being your lifeline. Let's rewind the clock. When Donald Trump entered the White House, he promised to reshape America's role in the Middle East. And he did. He recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital, moved the U.S. embassy there, and pulled America out of the Iran nuclear deal. To many, these were bold moves, historic decisions that changed the course of diplomacy. But behind the celebrations in Tel Aviv, there was also a storm brewing. Trump's policies didn't just strengthen Israel, they cornered its Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu into a very narrow political corner. Netanyahu suddenly became the face of decisions that alienated much of the world, decisions that deepened Israel's divide with its neighbors and even sparked new waves of anger across the Middle East. Internationally, Israel was more isolated than ever before, and yet, politically inside Israel, Netanyahu grew stronger. His alliance with Trump gave him what he needed most: validation, momentum, and time. Trump had handed him both a diplomatic burden and a political lifeline. You see, in politics, being cornered doesn't always mean being defeated. Sometimes it means being forced to fight harder, to play smarter, to survive longer. And that's what Netanyahu did. Trump's recognition of Jerusalem, his push for the Abraham Accords, all of it allowed Netanyahu to frame himself as a historic leader, a man who stood tall with America at his side. The same Trump who cornered him on the world stage may very well have saved him at home. But here's the real question, and it's one that echoes beyond the walls of Washington and Jerusalem. What happened to Palestine in all of this? While political power was being traded like currency, the Palestinian people became the forgotten cost of survival politics. The dream of peace was postponed yet again, buried under handshakes, photo ops, and shifting alliances, and that's where history's judgment will fall hardest. In the end, this isn't just a story about Trump or Netanyahu. It's a story about how global politics often dances on the edge of contradiction, where loyalty and pressure, friendship and strategy can all mean the same thing. Trump cornered Netanyahu, but he also might have saved him. And somewhere between those two realities lies the story of a region still waiting for justice. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Anderson Cooper. Good night. The story of Trump and Netanyahu's alliance isn't complete without looking at the silent third player in their political chess game, Palestine. When Donald Trump stepped into Middle Eastern diplomacy, he promised to achieve what others couldn't, a final peace deal between Israel and the Palestinians. Yet what followed wasn't peace, it was absence. The Palestinian voice, long central to the region's narrative, began to fade into the background of high-level handshakes, economic deals, and shifting alliances. It was a silence that spoke louder than any speech, a reminder that sometimes being left out of the conversation can be more damaging than being criticized within it. One of Trump's earliest moves was cutting U.S. funding to the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, UNRWA, which supported millions of Palestinian refugees. It was a policy justified under the banner of reform and accountability, but the immediate result was unmistakable: food shortages, school closures, and deepening despair in Gaza and the West Bank. The decision wasn't just financial, it was symbolic. It told the world that the Palestinian struggle was no longer a diplomatic priority for Washington. Trump's administration didn't simply ignore the Palestinian leadership, it deliberately sidelined them, closing the Palestinian diplomatic mission in Washington and dismantling decades of established communication. While these moves cornered Netanyahu internationally, they paradoxically strengthened his domestic position. With the U.S. firmly behind him, Netanyahu no longer needed to engage meaningfully with the Palestinian Authority. Trump's unflinching support gave him the freedom to expand settlements, solidify control, and reframe the narrative from peace talks to security. Every Israeli policy that once invited, in turn, National caution suddenly carried American approval. It was a political jackpot for Netanyahu and a strategic disaster for Palestine. The Palestinians found themselves watching history being rewritten in real time. When Trump announced the deal of the century, many hoped it might bring renewed dialogue. Instead, it offered a map that heavily favored Israel, granting sovereignty over key territories while leaving Palestinians with fragmented autonomy. The plan didn't just fail. It erased the very foundation of the two-state solution that generations of diplomats had worked toward. It was as if the future of Palestine had been negotiated without Palestine in the room. But the deeper story lies not in the deals, but in the psychology of abandonment. Imagine a nation whose struggle has defined international diplomacy for 70 years, suddenly removed from the headlines, replaced by celebratory images of Israel signing agreements with the UAE, Bahrain, and Morocco. The Abraham Accords were hailed as historic peace agreements, but for Palestinians, they were a painful reminder that the world was moving on without them. The regional solidarity that once supported their cause was cracking, and with every new handshake, their political isolation grew. There was also a domestic dimension. In the absence of international attention, Palestinian leadership faced rising internal frustration. Ordinary citizens questioned whether their leaders had lost relevance on the global stage. The once powerful narrative of resistance began to sound like an echo of the past. The youth in Gaza and the West Bank, many of whom have never seen a free Palestine, grew up watching others decide their fate on television screens. This generational disillusionment became one of the most devastating legacies of Trump's policies. And yet, perhaps the cruelest irony was that both Trump and Netanyahu could point to these very conditions as proof that their strategies were working. With the Palestinians politically weakened, Netanyahu could claim Israel was more secure than ever. Trump could argue that he had brought peace to the Middle East, even as the core conflict remained unresolved. In reality, it was peace without justice, stability without inclusion. The Palestinian question didn't disappear because it was answered. It disappeared because it was silenced. In the corridors of power, absence can be as powerful as presence. By cutting off aid, closing diplomatic doors, and shifting global focus, Trump ensured that Palestine's silence became the background music of his Middle East strategy. Netanyahu, standing beside him, gained both room to maneuver and an easy narrative to sell at home. Israel, supported by America, surrounded by peace. But beneath that polished political theater, an entire people were left waiting to be heard, waiting to be recognized, waiting to matter again. The truth is, the Palestinian void wasn't just a consequence of Trump's strategy, it was part of it. And as history continues to unfold, that silence, deep, deliberate, and devastating, may prove to be the loudest legacy of all.